Hello and welcome. Every year, the World Economic Forum puts out a gender gap index. The idea is to map the gaps between men and women in different countries when it comes to access to resources. It spotlights the gaps in 4 key areas: health, education, economy, and politics. So how does India fare? In 2021, India ranked 140th out of 156 countries. We ranked 98th in 2006 when the index was first published. Now, one of the metrics, the pay gap measure, is economic participation and opportunity. In 2021, we ranked 151 compared to 110 in 2006. We are sliding. And now COVID has made it worse. Our pay gap is among the highest in the world. We have fewer women in the workplace, fewer still in leadership positions. Right from boardrooms to the lowest levels in the workforce, women get paid less. Now that's the problem. But what's the solution? I'm Melody Bhatt, and today I'm joined by 2 people who can shine a brighter light on the solutions. We have with us Preeti Singh, Senior VP, Head, Human Resources, Mastercard South Asia. Preeti, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Melanie. Look forward to the discussion.
And we have with us Amitav Saha, Group Head, Human Resources, Biocon. Amitav, thanks very much for your time today.
My pleasure.
Well, so let's dive into our topic, which is bridging the gender pay gap. Now, Preeti, my first question is to you. In 2020, Mastercard reported that women were paid about 8% less than men on a role-to-role basis. So where is Mastercard on gender pay parity and gender parity in the workforce in India, and what's your playbook on it?
Thank you, Melanie, for posing that question. At Mastercard, we're committed to designing a better world for women that actually creates the limitless possibilities for all of us. We've ensured a gender equity in our workforce and made significant efforts to ensure that gender pay parity norms are adhered at all times, and have deployed stringent measures, processes, audits on an ongoing basis to ensure that there is a 100% parity. Equal pay for everybody in the organization. So at Mastercard, women earn $1 to every $1 men earn, which is doing the same role globally. Globally, we understand that a few countries have made gender parity or gender pay equity a statutory compliance, and others have not. But for us at Mastercard, we ensure that there's a constant review and there is a compliance and a pay parity for employees across the geographies and irrespective of their gender. At Mastercard, globally, we are about 39% of women workforce are women, and India stands at about 31% amongst close to 5,000 headcount across different locations that we have a presence in the country. We continue to make some very concerted efforts to add women to our local and global talent pool, starting from diverse candidate slates from recruiting to specific development interventions. I think it's very, very important for us to realize where do we start losing the women talent in the organizations, especially when it's the early career, mid-career, or the senior career levels. And we've kind of deployed specific interventions for developing the women in their leadership roles or in the journey. Women Who Lead, some of the programs that we put together, future leadership program, mentoring across different geographies. So those are the couple of interventions that we put together. Talking about the playbook that Melanie spoke about, our strategy and culture are well aligned to achieve our business goals. And very specifically to boost the gender equality, we've kind of put in place a 3-pronged strategic approach. It hinges on people, market, and society. And we would like to believe that people are like mostly our organization, but we like to influence the market and the society at large. Specifically talking about people, the endeavor is to create a very dynamic, engaged, and balanced workforce globally. Our return to work programs kind of are more structured to giving opportunities to mid-career professionals who've taken a career break and would like to re-enter the workplace. We have very specific intervention called Women Leadership Network, one of the 9 business resource groups. And this has got 31 chapters across the world, supporting more than 3,500 women members through their career development initiatives through various interventions as networking, learning development sessions, but also really supporting each other into the advancement and engagement, and kind of addressing what they should be really pursuing as their career, their skills, and also subtly talking about where they stand in terms of their, their value proposition to the organization and in turn from the organization. We have a signature program called Mastercard Girls for Tech, and in partnership with AIF, America India Foundation, to be specifically talking about India, we aim to train 1,200 teachers in 350 villages, because we do want to take the rural population to the urban area and would like to tap on that talent too. And by end of this year, 2021, we have already touched close to 100,000 girls at the age of 14 across 475 schools. I think these are the interventions that we are not looking at today to solve for the problem of gender inclusion a part of it, but also looking at a bit of the future, that how will we solve for it in the times to come, Melanie.
Preeti, that was very comprehensive. Amitabh, if I can come to you, Biocon is a global biopharmaceutical company. The website says that overall, the company has 83% men and 17% women. And when it comes to scientists, about 60% are men and 40% are women. This data is from your website. So where is the company now when it comes to pay parity, and what are the challenges of implementing it?
So the data is correct. But the data is also dynamic. So if you take the same period of, it would change, and you will see the band narrowing between the gender gap, as we say. So first and foremost, Biocon has always been an equal opportunity employer. And we are in the knowledge industry, even though manufacturing, quality, and R&D forms the backbone of our business. Now, when we look at pay has three components. One, the educational background of the incumbent. Two, the work experience of the incumbent. And third, the role for which the person is coming in. So at the same role with the education and the experience, there is no differentiation between men and women. So it's the same pay for everyone. Now, if you look at a company and look at different level bands, it's an interesting observation, because we have 3-4 companies in the group and 3-4 different businesses or sub-businesses that we adhere to. And there are places or bands where women are earning more. There are bands where men are earning more. And the place where men are earning more as a continuous or a consistent data point is the shop floor. Because today, when we look at our kind of business, about 40 to 50% of our employees are on the shop floor, manufacturing, quality, and so on and so forth. Now there, we obviously had a lot of restrictions from the regulatory side, from the labor side, till late, and we couldn't hire a lot of women. But now those restrictions are mostly gone. And so we are hiring women, but it takes a little time, because if you're looking for people with the relevant experience, they are not there in the market, because we haven't invested in building up this capability in the women workforce. So the best way to cover the gap is to take more and more freshers, train them, and then make them more relevant to the job, and then allow them to grow in an environment which fosters diversity inclusion, right? So we have two parts. One is we have a Biocon Academy, and there the gender ratio is completely the other way around. It's 70-30 in favor of women. And when we are hiring people today from campuses and also freshers off campus, we focus on more women candidates with the same qualifications, ability, and the kind of attributes that we are looking for in a potential employee. So you will see that the gap will narrow down. And if you look at the company itself, we are founded and led by one of the most influential women leaders around the globe. And her dream and her directive to all of us is by 2030, we should be a 50-50 gender diverse company, which is definitely a very, very tall, I won't say task, but a milestone to achieve. But we are going to get there. Now, when you talk of R&D, we look at scientists who have largely got PhDs or somebody who's got double PhDs or masters. Now there you have a lot of relevant population which is available today, both in India and abroad, who are willing to come and work for us. So in R&D, you will always find the ratio to be very different, and it's much more healthier as a gender mix. We also have a manufacturing setup in Malaysia, and there the percentage of women in the overall workforce is almost as high as 35 to 40%. So it all depends on where the pool of talent lies, what kind of incentives are there for women to come and work, and then the company's attraction power and the environment created to foster that talent.
Yeah, right. Preeti, it's 2021. Now we should have figured by now that equal pay deserves, equal work deserves equal pay. Why does that not happen in companies?
Yeah, Piloni, it's really unfortunate that till today women face discrimination. When it comes to opportunity and the compensation they get for their work, it's extremely disturbing to see that women participation rate is declining every year. And you just mentioned about the statistics a few minutes ago. Over the past 20 years or so, the participation rate of Indian women in labor force has just significantly declined, and less than the world's average. You spoke about it. So on a global level, when we look at it, gender pay gap stands at about 16%, which indicates that women worker on average earns about 84% of what men earn. And this difference, even greater for women a different skin tone in case of immigration or women with children. And this is a study by UN Women. So it's all stats and the data. This is just proving it that we need to do a little bit more around it. What I'd like to believe that the reasons for gender pay gap is a little more complicated and can be linked to reasons ranging from socioeconomic to structural. And I'd like to talk about more specifically Indian women. Some of them are privileged, but then a large part of our society is still not that privileged to receive the adequate education, preparation for being in the workforce. So they may have the qualification, but there is a finesse or a specific skill that is required to be in the part of the workforce. And many times these girls are kept out of school, drop off of school from early stages, not allowed to work. And what really disturbs me the most is the societal standard that has further resulted in the educational and occupational inequalities. The investment in education, that women still continue to be labeled as future homemakers and bread makers than the breadwinners. I think this is a dilemma that I'm personally really wanting to really address it. And with my little contribution, would like to really look at the society at large to see how can we really remove the social stigma around the workforce and really ensure that there's a general environment of social inclusion for women, and more so talking about the gender pay gap that may not, that needs to be really addressed at fairly quickly. Talking about the various wage policies that as a country we put in place for equal pay, for equal work, etc. But it's just the lack of awareness in both population, especially for women, and the seriousness around the implementation of these policies could possibly are leading to the gap in the pay equities.
Yeah,
the workforce, Melanie.
Yeah, I think it is work which is required by all three pillars. So
yeah,
it's just not the job of the corporate sector or just the society, but everyone together, I think, can hopefully make it happen. Amitabh, you spoke briefly about hiring a lot of young women, at Biocon. Now, I just want to understand, how does the gender pay gap manifest? Do men and women start out with equal pay? And does the pay gap then widen over time, or how is it?
So there are two different sectors that we need to consider here. One is an organized sector, which is where Biocon belongs, or most of the companies that we know of belong. And the other is the unorganized sector. So I would like to believe, and I have obviously had experience in the same, that the organized sector is largely agnostic from a gender perspective, as long as the person does the role and does it with a certain efficiency. So Biocon, for example, when a person joins, as I said, there's no difference in salary, whether she's a lady or he's a man, right? And then as they grow, it again goes with their promotions, their job roles, and their, the performances that they bring to the table. I also know of other companies which follow the same cycle. The issue happens where when you go to hire at a lateral level, people with experience, and there you find there's a difference between the experience of a pool of talent, which is men versus a pool of talent, which is women. And in certain places, you may not even find the women pool of talent because in this industry, over a period of time, people have not been working and going up the curve. Okay. So what happens there, you have to offer somebody a salary or a package which commensurates with their previous salary, experience, and so on and so forth. So if the person grows internally, there's no difference in pay parity. But if you laterally hire, then it all depends on where you're sourcing the person from and what is the salary that person is earning versus what is the role they can play.
This is all very interesting. I definitely want to, take it up as we go ahead. But sorry, go on.
No, sure. So the other thing is when you look at the unorganized sector, there it is a little all over the place. And for sure, there is a huge difference in the pay parity because you can actually have different salaries for the same kind of work because that's how it has been traditionally as a model.
Yeah.
But slowly it has to move. It's a change movement, right? And like Preeti rightly said, it's all about education. And education has two parts. One is education in schools, colleges, and so on. The other is educating the society. Because unless you have more and more women coming to schools or getting educated or allowing them to work, you cannot create that talent pool.
And I want both of you to answer this next question. Preeti, I'll begin with you. Where is the pay gap the widest? Is it when you go right to the top, or does it narrow at the board level? And if you can quantify what that pay gap is, and after you, Amita can take this.
Sure. I mean, I was just reading through some of the statistics before coming for this conversation, and do understand there's an analysis that was done by Prime Database on women executive, the executive directors, right? They earn 45% less than their male counterparts in the last fiscal as male CEO, CXO for salary. They were given few salary increases. And experts even attribute that this strong bias towards women CXOs in the corporate world is really affecting the career growth and promotions. Data also suggests that the wage inequalities become more blatant as the years of experience or the work experience rise. If there's a male director to the number of years of experience, he will earn more than a woman CXO, or so forth and so on and so forth. The real issue is, I'd like to say, is at the representation level of women at the board. Corporate India certainly, in comparison to the rest of the world, especially the Western world, Asia aspires by wide margin. It's a very wide margin when it comes to the presence of women in the board. Just about 17.3% of the large companies have them on their key decision-making bodies. I'd like to say that, broadly, if you were to really say in two sentences, 17.3% India holds the third lowest spot in AP region in terms of female representation in senior management level. Slightly ahead of South Korea at 8% and Japan at 7%. Similarly, the percentage at the female CEO level are about 5%, and the CFOs is swinging even lesser. So there are about 4% of women at the CFO level. So the short answer, Miloni, is much at the senior levels, as the career progresses, they get into the seniorish roles, the gap becomes wider. Over to you, Amita, what to add?
No, I think Preeti, you definitely shared some statistics, and I'm absolutely aligned to the stats. I can talk about Biocon very confidently, and when I look at our workforce, the difference in pay or pay parity comes in more because, as I said, of the role and the experience of the person. So if I take the bands in which people work, so at the lowest band, the difference is the highest today, for the simple reason that people have more experience versus less experience out there. So the same job, same role, same background gets paid the same. But because we have very few women, and most of them have very less experience compared to the men folk out there, so the pay parity difference is the highest. But from a Biocon group perspective, as we go up, we see that for the same kind of experience, there is no pay gap. But yeah, if you go absolutely to the top, the number of women leaders are very few. So if you look at the stats, the men pay percentage would go up. But that's because they had a different experience, came from a different background, or were earning more. So I think we need to look at it in that perspective rather than looking at it saying that, okay, here the parity is more or here the parity is less. It is also a subject of the population which resides in that particular pool.
Yeah, Melanie, can I add to what Mastercard,
Yes,
how we kind of have addressed? So what we have looked at it from ensuring that there is an equal pay and a pay parity amongst the men and women both, is that we start from the early career, and Amitabh just briefly touched upon it. For us, it's given that we'll have 50% of women joining us from various top B schools and the T schools that we call them, technology schools. And at the early career, we've never just differentiate. When we go to the college, it's the same pay scale that they come in. I think what happens is when women take a career break and when they come back, many of the companies, they kind of look at what is the value proposition that the woman talent is bringing. And that's where they start bringing the compensation related, the skills, the past experience, etc. So what we offer is to any woman who's returning to work after a career gap is we're offering the value of that role rather than looking the career gap or the educational qualification or what the skill that individual really brings to it. We've seen that when we've put in a very strong learning academies and learning interventions for these women professionals to be in place so that they come up to the par to their male counterparts. As I said about the value of the role is more important, and that's how we've kind of achieved $1 man earning the same $1 for women earning, is because we started defining what is the role and the impact that individual will make if he or she given that opportunity, and look at the compensation as the secondary aspect. We look at role, value for the role, offer it to the candidate, men or women, and that's how we started seeing the differences and bridging the gaps over a period of time at Mastercard.
Right, that's interesting, and it's something that other companies could also think about. But Preeti, coming back, we often think that women can bridge the wage gap through education and skilling. But here there is a huge paradox, right? Like, if the wage gap is only going to widen as one climbs up the corporate ladder, and obviously you have more skills at that point, one is assuming, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. So we made enough, at large, the government, the corporations, the private sector, the public sector, everybody has made a lot of effort, but there's still a long way to go. And we have to make still a lot more progress in that direction. And if I was to again talk about some more statistics, we were referring to US Bureau of Labor Statistics, and this is a report that came on 2020. The women's annual earnings were estimated to be about 82.3% of men's. And this gap is even widening as I just spoke about the skin tone, color, and everything else. It is important for us to really note that women also tend to move up the career ladder at a slightly slower pace than men. And this phenomena is the opportunity gap. For example, a roughly equal percentage of men and women begin their careers as an individual contributors, i.e. they don't manage the people, they're not people managers. In 2021, what we saw was 75% of men and 76% of women in the age of 20 to 29 are in the individual contributor roles. What I'm trying to say is that there is a potentially an opportunity for investing in women to see that how we are really helping them to really move up the value chain, build on their skills and also their respective areas of interest to see that that's where they would like to further go on. And this will possibly help us bridge the gender pay gap and the salaries. I'd like to say that gender gap per se, having more women is a larger issue than really seeing that they're earning equal salaries at some point of time.
Okay. Amitabh, in the corporate world, women are still penalized for motherhood, for being caregivers. Do you think it's time to pay women for the work they do at home?
Well, certainly yes. So let me first qualify the first statement. As we all know, a lot of changes in labor laws, regulations have come over the years. So today, when
Right.
we look at maternity breaks, we have a stipulated 26 weeks of maternity breaks. And then, for progressive companies like ours, we also give additional time for women to get adjusted to the new routine. And then, other than giving support for their children, which is through creche and other means, we also give women employees a choice of another 1 year where they can choose to be on the rolls of the company and not lose out on seniority or work experience, but at the same time, take more time to settle their homes. Now, these kind of policies are required at most corporates with most companies, because this not only allows women employees to settle down easier, faster, and in a more natural way, but also helps them take that plunge. Because what we do not want is the whole maternity or motherhood aspiration going either ways. And we have seen in the past that some women who really wanted to go up the professional ladder as fast as their colleagues and the men folk, they actually sacrificed their personal lives because they did not want to take that break, right? And then, when they decided, there could be problems, or they had actually, not gone for that career break at all. Now, we don't want that to happen, because that's not the right balance. Now, if you say across industries, is there something that we are missing today? Yes, we are. Because what happens is, when a lady who's climbing up the ladder goes for a leave or a break for 6 to 8 months, she loses out on that experience, where somebody else who's a man or an equal role main colleague who's getting that experience. And so they get their promotion or they get their increment faster. And the lady stays behind. There are obviously examples where women employees who have tremendous drive have come back and scaled the ladder as fast or even faster, but they are exceptions. So I think the time has come, definitely, for corporate India to look at this aspect and make sure that, one, the woman employee is not penalized for the break that she's taking. They get the whole benefit of that experience as if they were working in office. They get their promotions, get their increments, and don't feel bad about taking that break. But it is a change management process. So I'm hopeful that more and more companies will do this. And actually, the government is supporting it. So we are having legislations which are being passed, which help the corporates to take this decision. But the unorganized sector is a very different story.
Preeti, how can a woman negotiate better pay?
Oh, thanks, Melanie, very clearly. They need to be evaluating the role, ask for the job description to better understand what the role entails, right? And a clear understanding what the role is and what the compensation it might offer. So evaluate the role, do the research. It is always advisable to do the research before applying and understanding that what's the value of that role. And there are enough data points. If you do a Google search, there is Glassdoor, various websites that are kind of sharing what the compensation for a particular role could be, And then the third piece is, so evaluate the role, do your research. And the third piece where we kind of, as women, what I've seen generally is they kind of put their everything at the table. So understand the perspective of the employer before mentioning anything. What is your expectation then on the salary? Wait for them to really share and get a clear perspective to really share what your expectations are. You need to have a win-win position. Last but not the least, there are various organizations that are offering such kind of consultation and advisory services. If you're not clear about how do you really go about really negotiating or what kind of profile or job you'd like to go ahead and reach out to those organizations, seek their help. And it's always good to seek help. And last but not the least, I'll say when companies are more transparent about pay, it essentially eliminates the issue of unequal pay. And it would lead to, if we really put a transparent system in place, we would have a fair compensation being offered to men and women both, and there'll be less need for the women to negotiate for it at all. That's what I'd like to say.
Amitabh, from your vantage, what will it take to ensure that women, transgenders, people in the LGBTQ+ community are paid equally for equal work, policy perspective?
So I think there are 2-3 different policy parameters that we should look at here. One is how we equip a certain person to do the job, and they can come from any background. Why only gender or any such? It could be ethnic, it could be gender, it could be any person who has got a handicap or whatever it may be, right? So first and foremost, the person should be equipped to do the job. That's policy number one, which involves training, which involves partly education, and then getting a lot of on-the-job experience. Okay, which is where all the freshers, the raw talent, the hiring from different colleges, schools, all of that come in, right? The second part is creating a policy which, after the pandemic, it has become quite prevalent, is allowing people to work remotely if the job allows it. And many of the jobs actually today allow it. So one of the things which actually happened after the pandemic was we all realized that you don't need to be in office all the time to do your job effectively. Now, you asked a question previously that what can we do to ensure women get paid for their work at home? Now, if you allow remote working, we have seen that women employees can actually manage much better, and they can get the job done as well as do whatever chores are there at home without impacting work. And that makes it a very win-win kind of a proposition. So allow people to work remotely wherever possible or with whatever flexibility possible. So people can actually juggle multiple things together. Last but not the least, we should create certain opportunities for taking our women employees up the curve. And there, what I don't want to emphasize on is any kind of bias. It's not about a bias. But when we look at DEI today, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, the reason why everybody wants to do more in that space is that it is very good for business. Because by taking our women employees up the ladder, we bring in a very balanced environment. We bring in a lot of innovation of thinking, a lot of innovation of doing things differently. Okay, and we also create a certain harmony at the workplace, which goes beyond balance. So whether it's behavior, whether it is corporate branding, whether it is innovation, whether it's lateral thinking, all of this is good for the business. So these are certain, and there are multiple other policies to help the women employees at work. Like you can give them, certain parking, certain kind of allowances for, coming to office or working in late or flexible hours. There's so many different things which can happen, and many of our companies do it. But end of the day, the policies are only, some kind of enablements for people to, do their work well. But what would really help are these 3 pillars in my mind. Education, or giving them the equipment to do things well, which could be knowledge plus any other experience. Second is giving them a flexible work environment, and third, giving them certain roles, positions, and preparing them for that, so that there is a nice flow of the entire talent pool.
Right. And that's really a nice way for us to end this discussion. There have been very interesting points from both Amitav, you and Preeti. Things that we can mull over. Hopefully, we will see the gender pay gap narrowing for India. We will take into account good practices which have been put into place, by corporations, by companies such as yours, and many other companies will be able to adopt it. And hopefully, we won't have to discuss this, in the future. But Preeti Singh, Senior VP, Head Human Resources, Mastercard South Asia, and Amitav Saha, Group Head Human Resources, Biocon. Thank you very much for your time and your expertise today.
Thank you, Belani. Thank you, team.
Thank you. Thank you very much.